To understand what we're going to look at today, let's review something from Plato's work. The fact that Herculaneum was a port city, like most of the originally Greek cities on the southern coast of present-day Italy, is still hidden to this day. These spaces, where the remains of victims of the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD were found, were originally port warehouses where goods imported mainly from Africa were stored. An important commodity was grain, which was transported from the warehouses to the Roman granaries. Evidence of the existence of a port at Herculaneum can be found in the ancient villa of Adriane in nearby Stabiae. The name Adriana's villa is not accidental and is a real thread that will take us much further. This is a fresco from the interior of a villa, and most likely depicts an approximate view of the port at Herculaneum. The drawing is not very detailed, but note the columns on which the statues stand. And did you know that the two bronze statues that you can find in the Vatican today most likely came from the port of Herculaneum? They came from Greek workshops because the Romans copied these Greek statues in stone and then melted the bronze. These statues were hidden from people's eyes for many centuries, but that's another story. The statue on the right represents Hercules with the skin of the Nemean lion he killed. The statue on the left represents Hercules, probably holding the apples of the Hesperides. We cannot see all the columns on the fresco because the upper part of the fresco is damaged. But there were 12 columns, as the labors of Hercules, which are very likely depicted here. The statues on the columns are therefore figures of Hercules performing individual labors. If we zoom in on this detail, we can see Hercules fighting the seven-headed Hydra. Sometimes it is said to have 9 heads, but in reality there are 7, like the 7 heads of a dragon or a serpent. As in the ancient world, there is still a claim today that a harbor is the gateway to the world. So if Plato said that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, or what people called the Pillars of Hercules, he was referring to the harbor at Herculaneum, where Plato apparently resided. So he meant the entire world. Plato really messed with our heads. But the attentive reader thinks not only about the overall text, but also about the individual words, because Plato describes the disappearance of the island of Atlantis. That is, one of the 5 islands. Today, we would talk about the continent. However, the catastrophe was global. So why does he mention this island? And why 5 islands? We still have 5 continents. However, they have a completely different shape and layout. Christopher Columbus and the discovery of America. Was he really the first? Today we can say with certainty that Christopher Columbus was preceded by many other navigators, including the Sumerian civilization, the Egyptians, and the Greeks. This leads us to the fact that people knew the American continent at least 4,000 years before Christ. However, the boundary between the years before and after Christ is irrelevant. The teachings of Christ existed much earlier. Here we look at the area of southern Italy, where Herculaneum and its harbor are located, beyond whose columns the world opened up. Today we refer to Gibraltar as the Pillars of Hercules, but it only vaguely resembles the pillars, and there are only 2, while there were perhaps thousands of real ones all over the earth. The island that Plato claims was torn apart by some catastrophe is what is now North and South America, which were once one. Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, Panama, Cuba, and other islands, including the mysterious Bermuda Triangle. These are Plato's swamps. The fact that there were 5 islands on Earth, that is, continents in the shape of a circle, can still be deduced from the landmass that does not exist today. It is located below sea level. And that's not all. Part of all this was also the territory of today's Antarctica, which, in my opinion, is not a landmass, but a frozen archipelago. Why does Google Earth keep obscuring the center of this continent? It looks more like something is missing, like tying up a balloon. Further evidence of the disintegration of this Atlantic island is a peculiar ripple on the seabed that stretches from north to south. What caused such a catastrophe? We can only assume that the shift of the magnetic poles, as well as the liquefaction, great heat, and subsequent petrification of not only the waters, but also everything that contained water, contributed to this, as we have already explained earlier. We can imagine this event as a symbol of yin and yang, where the black part breaks away from the white part, turns 90 degrees, and the lower side drags with it even more debris of the continent that was located to the north. All of this is the original flooded landmass that witnessed a world with circular continents. If you were to assemble such a landmass into the supercontinent that mainstream science calls Pangaea, you would never succeed. Look at this. But now we're going back to Florida. The places we will visit are only a tiny fraction of what lies hidden in the swamps of Florida. First, we will return to the Rotunda, which is the local pearl. How is it possible that something like this could be preserved? This is probably due to the thick layer of limestone deposits that covered the site for millennia. What does Wikipedia say about this? The area was developed and named Rotunda West by Kavanaugh Communities Corporation, which purchased the land in 1969. The developer also purchased land in southern Martin County and northern Palm Beach County for a second project called Rotunda East. The land selected for this project was marshy areas. Due to changing views on the ecological value of wetlands, it was not considered wise to drain these wetlands, and the Army Corps of Engineers denied permission, so the Rotunda East project was abandoned. Who would be so crazy as to invest in wetlands? But let's continue with Wikipedia. The land was originally part of a large cattle ranch since 1952. Construction of Rotunda West began in 1970. The layout of Rotunda West mimics the temporary World War II airfields in South Florida, laid out like a wagon wheel. The choice of the airport layout as a model for Rotunda West gives it a touch of Florida history. However, there was no airfield on the site prior to construction. I will digress here and make one observation. In the case of similar areas with unusual geometry, these areas are occupied by the military, which has military training grounds and hangars there. Geometry that the native people of America considered sacred the US military uses as training targets. This happens especially in remote areas of Nevada and New Mexico. But there are many other similar military bases in strangely geometric areas around the world. It seems to me that the Kabbalah literally works on the basis of this sacred geometry. But let's continue with Wikipedia. The circular nature of the Rotunda West came about after Walt Disney debuted his City of Tomorrow, called Epcot, on national television on October 27, 1966, 2 months before Disney's death. The Rotunda community is divided into 8 segments with a central hub, called the Rotunda Community Park and Preserve, which is 1.5 miles in circumference. The hub contains a playground, tennis courts, and a walking trail, while most of the center is undeveloped. There is one undeveloped segment in the southwest. This undeveloped segment was to be named St. Andrews, but was not established due to wetland conservation efforts. So many quotes. And here comes the problem. Why won't conservationists allow the construction of the last segment when more and more residential neighborhoods are being built near the rotunda? Literally in the wetlands that surround the rotunda. The truth is different. This 8th segment could not be reconstructed because it was destroyed a long time ago. Simply put, it is irretrievably lost. Let's look at the details. You must have noticed the black and white photo from 1995. See for yourself how complex the geometric structure is here. However, not everything has been preserved. New construction of houses and greenery have covered almost invisible traces of the original structure of this wheel. And there's something else, proof that the 8th segment existed here. Traces of the water channel are still visible, and the beams are revealed by the vegetation. This whole crack extends all the way to the coast, which is also no longer original. The 8th segment must have broken off and may still be buried beneath the surface. This is really not about conservation, but about a missing link on which to build. When we look at the current rotunda, it has not changed much in principle. Other houses have been built here, not only inside the circle, but also in the surrounding area. However, the geometry of the whole is strange, resembling a printed circuit board. Let's take a look at what the rotunda probably looked like originally. Here we have evidence of what Plato described as strips of land and strips of water. They don't necessarily have to be in the shape of concentric circles, but they do have the shape of concentric circles in the circular latticework that supported these cities. An illustrative example can be found in the Bolivian lithium mine, as presented by Bloomberg. This is the actual supporting structure on which the slabs carved as ornaments lay. In this area, these slabs are still found, even with traces of very old cities. But we will show that some other time. Plato described this structure as concentric circles that were connected by bridges. These are the beams that we see here. This entire area was most likely buried under a layer of sediment for a long time, before these lines were discovered by human activity. Plato's strips of land are beautifully shaped and lined with bodies of water and canals. But the beauty of it all comes out when we highlight the geometry of the surroundings. Only now can we marvel at the incredible whole. its complexity visible only from a great height. Why? However, the geometry of the roads we see here is not unique to this region. It is also found on both American continents, in Egypt, in Asia, and even on many islands, some of which are very remote. And in many of these places we find the same image, strips of land alternate with strips of water. What's very special about this geometry are the round little squares that resemble the antennae of a butterfly, like in this pattern in the grain. Look at this. This image is from Roseville, California. You see what looks like sandstone blocks with a path emerging between them. And these are these strange structures in the New Mexico desert. If I highlight them, we get a map of the entire city. And again, these butterfly antennae appear. You wouldn't imagine a pattern like that. It's like Mayan hieroglyphics. You can't see anything down on Earth, but from up there, the whole picture is complete. The last image is from New Mexico again. A circular city has been discovered under a layer of limestone and rock. It is possible that the circular lattice structure still lies deep below the surface. Local people have made an inscription nearby. The Bible is true. Read it. We will explore the immediate surroundings of Rotunda, and in the next part, we will travel to the southern islands of Florida and the very interesting geology of the more distant surroundings. As you can see, the eastern and northern sides are quite densely populated. The southern part is very marshy with sinkholes and cracks. However, even in these marshes, there are geometrically arranged beams that continued the circle of the rotunda. Do you see the lattice structure? Its shape is copied by the vegetation that has taken hold here with its roots. New cities are being built along these lines, as seen on the right. There are also many sinkholes, which means that the calcium deposits are subject to erosion, especially in places where there were originally bodies of water or canals. Also note that this geometry was connected to the outer circle of the rotunda, replicating the shape of the entire circular city. It could be another water channel. Look at this. No houses were allowed to be built here due to nature conservation. Proof that this is nonsense is this hidden structure that was broken and the entire 8th segment collapsed. Everywhere you look, you see geometrically arranged lines. Incredibly. Is this still a protected area or a restricted area? We can even see the runway on these lines. If the area is protected, the airport has no business there. More roads are being built here, but we are only in 2022 on the timeline. Something appears here that looks like the original water channel, but with many dips. But note the regular shape of these islands. It seems that the stone slabs that Plato said were carved may also have been preserved here. As you can see, the southern part towards the coast is quite torn. The truss structure is no longer there. It has been torn out or has sunk deep below the surface. Let's look to the north. Here we also have an interesting shape, but I think that not everything was cleaned here and that originally these were islands that again surrounded the water channels. See that grid there? And here's another island slab flanked by a water channel. It kind of looks like a four-leaf clover. If you look closely, it was connected to a truss structure. I'll highlight it. See how geometric it all is? The east coast of Florida is even more interesting, but we'll save that for next time. Here we also have some traces. Maybe there were beams here, but they are gone. Maybe they were deformed during the cataclysm. Look at these water channels. They have most likely not been completely cleared of sediment and now do not connect to the main channel that crosses this place. But that is not completely cleared either. Do you see it there? I'll rotate the image and highlight it. This part of the structure is very likely incomplete and damaged. In the lower part of the picture, you can see how it connects to the main road and also to the geometry of the newly built city. This is how many cities are built, not only on the American continent. on very old lines of a very old advanced civilization. These pictures confirm my assumption that this is indeed happening. We will look at one more area and say goodbye for now. In the left part of the image, we see the swamps again, into which the geometry of the city extends. But even in the swamps, you can see something like these traces of beams. But I think we've strayed too far from the rotunda. Where is it? Here it is. And north of it, there is another interesting place. Wow. So I'm not sure if there will be any more development in these areas. Maybe there will be a park, but there was definitely something here once. It appears to be quite damaged, but notice how these lines in the swamp seamlessly connect to the surrounding city structure. The rotunda can be considered a true pearl of Florida. If it could talk, it would probably tell us the incredible story of Noah's flood or the sinking of Atlantis, because it is one and the same story. But to put this story together, it is necessary to put together thousands of fragments, mainly by searching for words in old texts, because not everything that has a biblical name is truly authentic. But I still forgot something? And what about crop circles, for example? If the rotunda has such a beautiful relief, could it not be a message? Are they perhaps models of lost circular cities? But a message from whom? Look at this picture. Do you see the concentric circles and bridges? And what about La Jolla in Bolivia, for example? Here, too, a circular city appears with beautiful geometry in the surroundings. You can see the coordinates in the picture. You can go there yourself. This circle is 1.5 miles in diameter. so it's smaller. The rotunda is about 3 miles in diameter. And the lithium mine in Bolivia, located just like La Jolla in the Andes, concentric circles and bridges. There is a bust of a woman called the Lady of Elche. Many believe that she has some kind of technical device on her head. Look closely. Do you see the concentric circles and bridges? She is Mother Earth.